Bellamy Galloway thought her platinum status gave her the power to choose her neighbors, but she was about to learn that money cannot buy class or safety. "I demand you move him," Bellamy hissed, her voice cutting through the hushed luxury of the first-class cabin. She pointed a manicured, diamond-clad finger directly at the young black man sitting quietly in seat 1A. "I did not pay $6,000 to sit next to a thug. It's unsafe." The cabin went dead silent. Bellamy smirked, expecting the flight attendant to crumble. She didn't know that the man in the hoodie wasn't just a passenger, and she certainly didn't expect Captain Elijah King to step out of the cockpit, lock eyes with her, and deliver a lesson in justice that would leave the entire airport cheering. The automated glass doors of JFK's Terminal 4 slid open, admitting a gust of chilly October wind and Bellamy Galloway. She didn't walk. She marched, the click-clack of her Louboutin heels acting as a warning siren to anyone in her path. Trailing behind her was a porter, struggling with 4 Louis Vuitton suitcases, sweating profusely despite the air conditioning. Bellamy adjusted her oversized sunglasses, though she was indoors. She was the widow of a real estate tycoon, a woman who had spent the last 20 years believing that the world existed solely to serve her. Today, she was flying to Paris for Fashion Week, and her mood was already foul because her driver had been 3 minutes late. "Check in. Now," she snapped at the young woman behind the Meridian Air First Class counter. The name tag read Sarah. "Good morning, Mrs. Galloway," Sarah said, forcing a bright smile despite the woman's tone. "May I have your passport?" Bellamy slapped the document onto the counter. "Make sure I'm in 1B. I want the aisle, and ensure the seat next to me is empty. I don't want to be breathing the same recycled air as the common rabble." "I'm afraid the flight is fully booked today, ma'am," Sarah replied apologetically, typing rapidly. "Fashion Week draws a large crowd. Seat 1A is occupied." Bellamy leaned over the counter, lowering her sunglasses to reveal icy blue eyes, narrowed in disdain. "Occupied by whom? If it's some crying infant or a tourist using miles, move them. I am a Diamond Medallion member. My husband built half the skyline you see outside. The passenger in 1A is a very frequent flyer with us as well," Sarah said diplomatically, handing back the boarding pass. "I'm sure you'll find the accommodations comfortable." Bellamy snatched the pass. "We'll see about that." She swept through security, bypassing the long lines of economy passengers with a look of sheer revulsion, as if poverty were a contagious disease. By the time she reached the exclusive Meridian Lounge, she had already berated a janitor for sweeping too close to her shoes and complained that the champagne was not chilled to exactly 45 degrees. But the real drama began when pre-boarding was announced. Bellamy was always the first to board. She liked to be settled with her mimosa before the cattle class began their trudge to the back. She walked down the jet bridge, feeling the familiar rush of superiority. Stepping onto the plane, she turned left into the first-class cabin. It was a sanctuary of soft leather, warm lighting, and hushed tones. But as Bellamy approached row 1, she stopped dead in her tracks. Already seated in 1A, the window seat directly next to hers, was a man. He was young, perhaps in his late 20s, with dark skin and short, cropped hair. He was wearing a grey oversized hoodie, black sweatpants, and pristine white sneakers. He had large noise-cancelling headphones on and was tapping away on a tablet, completely engrossed in his work. Bellamy's jaw tightened. In her world, people who looked like him were luggage handlers or security guards, not seatmates in a $6,000 cabin. "Excuse me," she said loudly to the flight attendant standing by the galley, a tall woman named Jessica. Jessica stepped forward. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Galloway. Can I take your coat?" "You can take this problem away," Bellamy said, her voice rising. She gestured vaguely at the man in 1A. "There has been a mistake. This is first class." Jessica looked confused. "Yes, ma'am, that is correct." "Then why?" Bellamy whispered harshly, leaning in. "Is he sitting there? Did he sneak in? Is he lost? Look at how he's dressed. He looks like he just robbed a convenience store." Jessica's expression hardened instantly. "Mrs. Galloway, that passenger has a ticket. Please take your seat so we can continue boarding." Bellamy looked at the empty seat in 1B, then at the man in 1A, who hadn't even looked up. The proximity was unacceptable to her. It wasn't just snobbery. It was a deep-seated, ugly prejudice she had never bothered to hide. "I am not sitting there," Bellamy declared, crossing her arms. "Get the purser, now." The line of passengers boarding the plane had stalled. Bellamy Galloway was standing in the middle of the aisle, effectively blocking anyone else from entering the first-class cabin. Behind her, a businessman checked his watch, and a mother held a fussy toddler. But Bellamy didn't care. She was fighting a holy war for her own comfort. The purser, a man named Robert with greying temples and infinite patience, approached. Jessica had already briefed him. "Mrs. Galloway," Robert said smoothly. "I understand you have a concern." "A concern? I have a safety issue," Bellamy lied, her voice loud enough for the first few rows of economy to hear. "I do not feel safe sitting next to that man. His demeanor is suspicious. He's wearing a hood. For all I know, he has a weapon." The man in 1A, Dr. Tobias Grant, finally looked up. He slid his headphones down to his neck. His eyes were calm, intelligent, and weary. He looked at Bellamy, then at Robert, and a faint, sad smile touched his lips. He didn't say a word. He just turned back to his tablet. His silence infuriated Bellamy. She wanted a reaction. She wanted him to shout so she could prove he was aggressive. "See?" Bellamy shrieked. "He's ignoring me. It's arrogant. I bet he's on drugs. Look at his eyes." "Ma'am," Robert said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming sterner. "The passenger in 1A is a valued customer. He has gone through the same security checks as you. You are blocking the aisle. You have two choices. Take your assigned seat or deplane." Bellamy gasped. "Deplane? Do you know who I am?" "I am Bellamy Galloway. I am personal friends with the CEO of this airline's parent company. If I make one phone call, you will be serving coffee at a gas station in Nebraska by tomorrow morning." The threat hung in the air. In the economy section, people were craning their necks. Several phones were already out, cameras recording. "I want him moved to economy," Bellamy demanded, pointing at Tobias. "Put him in the back where he belongs. Give his seat to one of these other people." She waved a dismissive hand at a white businessman standing behind her. "He looks like he actually paid for a ticket." Tobias Grant sighed. He tapped the screen of his tablet, saving his file. He turned his body fully toward the aisle. "Ma'am," Tobias said. His voice was a rich baritone, articulate and calm. "I am trying to finish a report on structural integrity for a bridge in Dubai. You are making it very difficult to concentrate." "Don't you speak to me!" Bellamy recoiled as if he had spat at her. "Robert, did you hear that? He's harassing me. He's aggressive. I refuse to fly with this hoodlum next to me." "That is enough," Robert said, stepping between them. "Mrs. Galloway, take your seat immediately. This is your final warning." Bellamy's face turned a mottled shade of red. She felt cornered. She couldn't lose face now, not in front of the peasants in economy. She had to escalate. She needed the ultimate authority. "I want the pilot," she screamed. "Get the captain out here. I want to speak to the person in charge of this vessel. I will not be flown by a crew that endangers wealthy women by forcing them to sit next to potential criminals." Robert looked at her, his face unreadable. "You want the captain?" "Yes, get him. Tell him Bellamy Galloway is fearing for her life Because of the demographic in row 1. Robert shared a quick glance with Tobias in seat 1A. Tobias gave a microscopic nod. Very well, Robert said. I will inform Captain King. Robert turned and walked toward the cockpit door. Bellamy smoothed her Chanel jacket, a smug smile returning to her face. She had won. Captains were sensible men, usually ex-military. He would see a well-dressed, wealthy white woman and a young black man in a hoodie, and he would make the logical choice to protect the airline's reputation. She leaned toward Tobias, whispering venomously, "You enjoy that seat while you can. You'll be in the back by the toilets in 5 minutes, if you're lucky." Tobias didn't look up. "We'll see, Mrs. Galloway. We'll see." The cockpit door clicked open. A hush fell over the front of the plane. Captain Elijah King stepped out. He was a giant of a man, standing 6'4", with broad shoulders that filled the doorway. His uniform was immaculate, 4 gold stripes gleaming on his epaulets. He put his hat on, adjusting the brim. He had a face carved from granite, but his eyes were sharp and piercing. He walked slowly toward row 1, his gaze fixed on Bellamy. "Mrs. Galloway?" Captain King asked. His voice was deep, commanding, and carried a weight that made the air conditioning seem loud by comparison. "Finally!" Bellamy threw her hands up. "Captain, thank God. Your crew is incompetent. I am refusing to fly next to this man. I want him removed. He is clearly a security risk, and quite frankly, he doesn't fit the profile of a first-class passenger." Captain King looked at Bellamy. Then he looked down at Tobias. "Is that so?" King asked. "Yes." "Look at him." Bellamy laughed nervously. "It's obvious. Just move him, and we can take off. I'm sure you have a schedule to keep." Captain King nodded slowly. "I do have a schedule, and I take the safety and comfort of my passengers very seriously." He reached for the intercom handset on the wall, but he didn't lift it to his mouth yet. Instead, he looked at Tobias. "Sir," Captain King said to the man in the hoodie, "are you comfortable?" "I was, Captain," Tobias said, "until about 10 minutes ago." Captain King turned back to Bellamy. "Mrs. Galloway, you have made a request to remove a passenger because you do not like his appearance, and you assume he is a threat based on his race. Is that a fair summary?" "It's not an assumption. It's intuition. I'm rich. I have targets on my back," Bellamy scoffed. "Just get him off." Captain King stared at her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he unclipped the microphone from the wall and brought it to his lips. His voice boomed through the entire aircraft. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a situation in the first-class cabin that requires immediate resolution." Bellamy beamed. She smoothed her skirt, ready to watch the thug be escorted away. "One of our passengers has expressed that they cannot fly safely with the current passenger manifest," King continued. "Therefore, to ensure the comfort and safety of the flight." He paused. Bellamy turned to Tobias with a triumphant sneer. "I am exercising my authority as pilot in command." Captain King reholstered the mic. He looked directly at Bellamy. "Mrs. Galloway," King said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper, "get your bags." Bellamy blinked. "Excuse me? He doesn't have any bags. I saw him." "Not him," Captain King said, stepping closer, towering over her. "You. Get your bags. You are getting off my plane." Bellamy's mouth fell open. "Me? You're kicking me off? Do you know how much I paid?" "I don't care if you bought the plane," King said. "On this vessel, my word is law. You have disrupted the flight, abused my crew, and harassed a passenger. You are a security risk. Get off." "I will not," Bellamy shrieked, clutching the headrest of seat 1B. "I will sue you. I will have your license. I'm not going anywhere until he is gone." Captain King smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile. "You want him gone?" King asked. "Fine." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out his sunglasses. He put them on. Then he reached up and unpinned the pilot's wings from his chest. "If he goes," King said, "I go." Bellamy froze. "What?" "You heard me," King said. He looked around the cabin, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "This man, Dr. Tobias Grant, is not just a passenger. He is the chief aerospace engineer for Meridian Air. He designed the navigation system for this aircraft. He is also my brother-in-law." A collective gasp went through the cabin. Bellamy turned pale. "And," King continued, "since you refuse to fly with his kind, and since I am also his kind, I guess you can't fly with me either." Captain King grabbed his flight bag from the cockpit floor. "I'm walking off," King announced. "This flight is cancelled." The silence that followed Captain Elijah King's declaration was heavier than the jet itself. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. The hum of the auxiliary power unit seemed to whine in anticipation. Then, Captain King moved. He didn't just threaten, he executed. He stepped out of the cockpit, grabbed his leather flight bag, and tossed his cap onto the pilot's seat. He buttoned his blazer, not looking back at the controls he had spent 20 years mastering. He walked past Bellamy Galloway, his shoulder brushing hers with the force of a freight train, and stood next to Dr. Tobias Grant. "Come on, Toby," King said, his voice level but final. "We're going to get a steak. I'm off the clock." Tobias Grant packed his tablet into his slim briefcase. He stood up, towering over Bellamy now that he was on his feet. He adjusted his hoodie, gave Bellamy a polite nod, and followed the captain toward the exit door. Bellamy stood frozen in the aisle, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. She turned to the flight attendants. Jessica and Robert were staring at her with a mixture of horror and barely suppressed glee. He can't do that!" Bellamy shrieked, the panic finally cracking her voice. "He can't just leave! We have a schedule. I have a gala in Paris." From the cockpit, the first officer, a younger man named Dave Miller, stepped out. He looked pale. He looked at the empty captain's seat, then at Bellamy, then grabbed the PA mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dave's voice cracked slightly over the speakers, "as you just heard, we have lost our pilot in command. Due to federal regulations, this aircraft cannot operate without a captain, and since our captain has just resigned due to a hostile work environment created by a passenger, this flight is officially cancelled." The cabin erupted. It wasn't just a groan of disappointment. It was the roar of a riot. "Cancelled," a man in row 3 shouted, standing up. He was a large man in a tailored suit, face red with sudden rage. "I have a merger meeting in London in 6 hours." "My sister is getting married," a woman in 4B cried out, tears already springing to her eyes. Bellamy whirled around, facing the cabin. "Don't look at me. It's him. It's that unprofessional pilot. He's the one who walked off." "He walked off because you're a racist bigot," the man in row 3 roared, pointing a finger that shook with anger. "We all heard you. You couldn't just sit down and shut up, could you? You had to make a scene because you didn't like the guy's hoodie." "He looked dangerous," Bellamy defended herself, but her voice was shrinking against the wall of sound coming from the passengers. "I was looking out for everyone's safety." "Safety?" A young mother from economy pushed her way up to the curtain divider, a toddler on her hip. "You held up boarding for 20 minutes, and now you've got the flight cancelled? Who do you think you are?" "I am Bellamy Galloway," she screamed, stomping her foot, "and I will not be spoken to like this by people who fly coach." That was the match in the powder keg. The economy cabin surged forward. People were unbuckling. The aisle was flooding with angry passengers pushing toward first class. Phones were raised high, a sea of black rectangles recording every second of her meltdown. Flashlights blinded her. "World Star!" someone shouted from the back. "Get her off the plane!" another voice chanted. Make her pay for the tickets!" Bellamy backed up, retreating until her back hit the cockpit door. She looked for an ally. She looked at Robert, the purser. "Do something!" she ordered him. "Control these animals! They are threatening me!" Robert crossed his arms. He leaned against the galley wall, checking his fingernails. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Galloway. But according to you, I'm just a servant who serves coffee. I wouldn't know how to handle a security situation. Perhaps you should call your friend, the CEO." Bellamy fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she dropped it. It clattered onto the floor, sliding under the seat she had refused to sit in. "Captain King!" she yelled toward the open exit door, desperate now. "Come back, I'll sit anywhere. Just fly the damn plane." But the jet bridge was empty. Captain King and Tobias Grant were already gone. The first officer, Dave, looked at her with cold eyes. "You need to leave, Ma'am. You've interfered with the flight crew. That's a federal offense. I've already radioed the Port Authority. They're on their way." "Federal offense?" Bellamy blanched. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm a customer. The customer is always right. Not at 30,000 feet, and not when you abuse the staff," Dave said. "And definitely not when you insult the man who wrote the code that keeps this plane from falling out of the sky." The sound of heavy boots echoed from the jet bridge. The angry mob in the aisle quieted down, parting like the Red Sea. 2 police officers from the Port Authority entered the plane. One was a burly sergeant with a thick mustache named O'Malley. The other was a younger, sharp-eyed officer named Hernandez. Their hands rested near their belts. They didn't look like customer service agents. They looked like the law. "Who is the problem here?" Sergeant O'Malley asked, his voice booming over the murmurs of the crowd. 50 hands pointed at Bellamy. "Her," the man in row 3 said. "She abused the pilot, abused a passenger, and got the flight cancelled." Bellamy straightened her jacket, attempting to regain her composure. She summoned every ounce of entitlement she had left. "Officers, finally," she said, stepping forward. "I want to file a report. The pilot has abandoned his post. I want him arrested for breach of contract. And I want these people removed from my personal space." Sergeant O'Malley looked at the first officer. "Captain Walkoff?" "Yes, Sergeant," Dave Miller confirmed. "He declared the flight unsafe due to this passenger's hostile behavior and refusal to follow crew instructions. He resigned his command." O'Malley nodded. He turned his gaze to Bellamy. It wasn't a friendly gaze. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back." Bellamy froze. "Excuse me?" "You are under arrest," O'Malley stated calmly, pulling a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. The sound of the ratchet clicking open was audible in the silent cabin. "Arrest?" Bellamy laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "You can't arrest me. I'm wealthy. My lawyer is on speed dial. Do you know who I am?" "I don't care if you're the Queen of England," O'Malley said, spinning her around with practiced efficiency. "You are disrupting an airport facility and interfering with flight operations. That's a felony." The cold steel clicked around Bellamy's wrists. The sensation was shocking. She had never felt handcuffs before. They were tight, pinching the delicate skin of her wrists. "You are making a mistake!" she screamed, as O'Malley pushed her forward. "I will have your badge. I will sue the city. I will buy this airport and fire you." "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Hernandez recited, reading from a card as they began to march her toward the door. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." "I won't be silent. This is discrimination. I am the victim here," Bellamy wailed. As the officers hauled her toward the exit, the first-class cabin watched in stony silence. But as she passed the curtain into the galley, she realized with horror that they weren't taking her out the side door. The jet bridge was blocked by maintenance gear. They had to walk her up the aisle to the second door. She had to walk past the 300 people whose day she had just ruined. The walk from the front of the plane to the mid-cabin exit was less than 50 feet. But for Bellamy Galloway, it felt like the Green Mile. As Sergeant O'Malley led her past the curtain dividing first class from economy comfort, the wall of sound hit her again. But this time, it wasn't shouting. It was laughter. It was booing. "Nana nana, hey, 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 goodbye." A group of college students in row 10 started singing. The chant caught on instantly, spreading back through the rows like a wave at a stadium. Bellamy kept her head high, staring straight ahead, refusing to make eye contact. Tears of rage were stinging her eyes, threatening to ruin her mascara. But she wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "They are animals," she told herself. "Filthy, jealous animals. They hate me because I'm beautiful and rich." "Nice bracelets, lady," a man shouted, pointing at her handcuffs. "Hope you like prison food. There goes the Wicked Witch of the West." Everywhere she looked, phones were pointed at her. She saw herself on the screens, her face distorted by anger and fear, being live-streamed to TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. She tried to duck her head, but O'Malley held her arm firmly, keeping her upright. "Keep moving, Mum," O'Malley grunted. She stumbled as her heel caught on the carpet. She nearly fell into the lap of an elderly woman in an aisle seat. The woman didn't help her up. She just pulled her knitting bag away, as if Bellamy were contagious. "Watch it," the old woman snapped. "I didn't do anything," Bellamy sobbed, the composure finally breaking. "Why are you all being so mean to me? I just wanted a safe seat." "You wanted to be a bully," a teenager shouted from across the aisle, "and you got knocked out." They reached the exit door. The cool air of the jet bridge hit her face, but it brought no relief. As she stepped off the plane, she saw that the terminal gate area was packed. The passengers for the next flight were waiting, and word had already spread. Hundreds of people were pressed against the glass windows of the terminal, watching the drama unfold. O'Malley marched her up the ramp. Bellamy's legs felt like lead. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. She would wake up in her penthouse, and this would all be a bad dream caused by cheap wine. But the fluorescent lights of Terminal 4 were unforgivingly real. As they burst out into the gate area, the waiting crowd fell silent for a split second, taking in the sight of the woman in the Chanel suit and handcuffs. Then a slow clap started. It was Tobias Grant. He was standing near the podium, leaning against the counter, holding a Starbucks cup. Captain King was next to him, no longer wearing his blazer, looking relaxed. Tobias clapped slowly, rhythmically. Captain King joined in, then the gate agent, Sarah, then the passengers waiting to board. The applause grew until it filled the cavernous hall. It wasn't applause of admiration. It was the applause of justice served. It was the sound of hundreds of people acknowledging that for once, the bad guy lost. Bellamy locked eyes with Tobias. He raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "Have a safe trip, Mrs. Galloway," Tobias called out. Bellamy lunged toward him, straining against O'Malley's grip. You planned this. You set me up. Walk!" O'Malley barked, jerking her toward the concourse exit. As she was dragged away, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush, Captain King turned to the gate agent. "Sarah," King said calmly, "I'm going to need to file a flight plan. Looks like I'm unresigning." Sarah grinned. "I'll get the paperwork, Captain." "And Sarah?" King added, gesturing to the crowd of stranded passengers who were now cheering for him. "Open the lounge. Drinks are on the airline. I think everyone needs a minute to decompress before we reboard." Meanwhile, Bellamy was being shoved into the back of a police cruiser at the curb. Passers-by with luggage carts stopped to gawk. She saw her reflection in the window of the car. Her hair was a mess. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black streaks, and her expensive jacket was wrinkled. She looked exactly like the common rabble she despised. "This isn't over," she screamed at Officer Hernandez as he buckled her in. "I will sue you all. I want my phone call." "You'll get your call at the precinct," Hernandez said, slamming the door shut. The car pulled away, merging into the chaotic JFK traffic. Bellamy sat in the hard plastic seat, the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant filling her nose. For the first time in 20 years, she had no control. No driver, no servants, no platinum card to wave to make the problems go away. She was alone. But the nightmare was only beginning. Because while Bellamy thought this was just a misunderstanding that her lawyers would fix by lunchtime, she had no idea that the video of her meltdown had already been uploaded. The title of the video, posted by the teenager in row 10, was simple. "Karen calls pilot's brother, a thug, gets arrested, and flight cancelled." It had 50,000 views in the 10 minutes it took to drive to the station. By the time Bellamy was being fingerprinted, she was the most hated woman in America. And karma was just warming up. The holding cell at the Queens County Central booking facility smelled of bleach, old sweat, and despair. It was a concrete box painted a peeling shade of institutional green. For Bellamy Galloway, who had not sat on a piece of furniture that wasn't upholstered in Italian silk for 2 decades, it was hell on earth. She sat on the cold metal bench, hugging her knees. Her Chanel jacket was draped over her lap to protect it from the grime. Her shoes had been taken. Standard procedure for suicide prevention, the intake officer had drawled, leaving her standing in her stocking feet on the sticky floor. "Galloway!" A guard banged on the bars. "Your lawyer is on the line. You get 5 minutes." Bellamy scrambled up, her heart leaping. Finally. Sanity. Leonard would fix this. Leonard Holloway was the most ruthless attorney in Manhattan. He charged $1,000 an hour and had buried DUI charges for senators. He would have the mayor on the phone, the charges dropped, and a limousine waiting outside within the hour. She was led to a phone bank on the wall. She snatched the receiver. "Leonard!" she gasped, her voice trembling. "Thank God! You have to get me out of here. These people are barbarians. They took my shoes, Leonard. I want to sue the police department, the airline, and that pilot. I want them all destroyed." There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was a heavy, cold silence. "Bellamy," Leonard's voice came through, but it lacked its usual oily warmth. It sounded distant, metallic. "I'm not coming down there." Bellamy blinked. "What?" "Don't be absurd. Send an associate, then. I don't care who comes. Just pay the bail and get me a car." "You don't understand," Leonard said. "I'm not representing you on this, Bellamy. The firm is dropping you as a client, effective immediately." Bellamy felt the blood drain from her face. "Dropping me? I pay you a retainer of $200,000 a year. You work for me." "I work for Galloway Enterprises," Leonard corrected her sharply. "And as of 20 minutes ago, the board of directors held an emergency vote. They have invoked the morals and reputational damage clause in your late husband's trust." "The... what?" Bellamy gripped the phone cord, her knuckles white. "The video, Bellamy," Leonard sighed. "It has 30 million views. 30 million. It's on CNN, it's on the BBC. You called the chief engineer of Meridian Air a thug and a hoodlum while screaming about platinum status. The stock price of Galloway Enterprises dropped 4% in the last hour. The board is distancing themselves. They are freezing your access to the company accounts to protect the brand." "They can't do that!" Bellamy shrieked. "That's my money. My husband built that company." "It's the shareholders' company," Leonard said coldly. "And you are toxic, radioactive. Even I can't be seen standing next to you right now. My other clients would revolt." "Leonard, please," Bellamy whimpered, her arrogance shattering into a million pieces. "I have no cash on me. They took my cards. How do I make bail? How do I get home?" "You have a personal savings account, don't you? Use a public defender. Good luck, Bellamy." Click. The line went dead. Bellamy stood there, holding the receiver, the dial tone buzzing in her ear like a flat line. She looked at the guard. "He hung up," she whispered. "5 minutes is up," the guard said, indifferent. Back in the cell. As she was shepherded back into the cage, the reality of her situation crashed down on her. She wasn't just in jail. She was a pariah. The shield of money she had used to bludgeon the world into submission had just been turned off. She sat back down on the metal bench. Across from her, a woman arrested for shoplifting, a woman Bellamy would have crossed the street to avoid yesterday, looked at her with pity. "Rough call?" the woman asked. Bellamy didn't answer. She just put her head in her hands, and for the first time in years, she cried. Not fake tears for sympathy, but real, ugly tears of terror. It took 12 hours for Bellamy to be processed. Because her assets were frozen, she couldn't post the $10,000 bail immediately. She had to wait for a court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking man named Mr. Henderson, who smelled of stale tobacco and looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He managed to get her released on her own recognizance, mostly because the jail didn't want the media circus camped out in their lobby anymore. "Go out the back," Henderson advised her as he handed her back her paperwork. "The front is a zoo." "I need a car," Bellamy said, her voice hoarse. She looked a wreck. Her hair was matted, her makeup smeared into a raccoon-like mask, and her expensive suit was wrinkled and stained. "Uber app," Henderson grunted, checking his watch. "I have another arraignment. Stay in the state. Don't contact the airline." He walked away. Bellamy stumbled out of the rear exit of the courthouse into the grey light of a Queen's morning. She fumbled with her phone, which had been returned to her with 2% battery life. She turned it on. It vibrated instantly, not once, but continuously. A solid 10 seconds of buzzing, thousands of notifications, texts from friends telling her to never call them again, hate mail on Instagram, Twitter mentions that were scrolling so fast she couldn't read them. She opened her banking app to call an Uber. Error. Account suspended. Contact issuer. She tried her credit card app. Card locked. Fraud alert. Administrator lock. "No!" she gasped, tapping the screen frantically. "No, no, no! There she is!" The shout came from the corner. Bellamy looked up. They hadn't been fooled by the back exit. A phalanx of photographers and reporters sprinted toward her. Flashes popped like strobe lights, blinding her. Microphones were shoved in her face. Mrs. Galloway, do you have a comment on the allegations? Did you really say you wouldn't sit next to a black man? How do you feel about Meridian Air suing you for the cost of the cancelled flight? They say it's over $200,000. Bellamy, look here. Give us a smile. Bellamy held her purse over her face, backing away. Leave me alone. Get away from me. She backed right into a puddle of dirty rainwater, the cold liquid soaking through her stockings. The cameras clicked furiously. This was the money shot. The Queen of Park Avenue, looking like a drowned rat, cornered in an alley in Queens. "I need a taxi," she screamed at the reporters. "Someone get me a taxi." "Your credit is no good, honey," a paparazzo shouted. "Better start walking." A black SUV pulled up to the curb. For a second, Bellamy thought it was her salvation. Maybe Leonard had a change of heart. Maybe the driver had come. The window rolled down. It wasn't a driver. It was a young woman holding a smartphone, live streaming. "Oh my God, it's really her," the woman laughed, pointing the phone at Bellamy. "The airport Karen. Hey, say platinum status for the camera." The car sped off, the occupants laughing. Bellamy turned and ran. She ran down the sidewalk, her unshod feet aching, the flashes following her. She ducked into a bodega, the bell jingling above the door. "Help me," she panted to the man behind the counter. "Please, call me a car. I'll pay you double. I'll wire you the money." The owner, an older man named Mr. Rivera, looked at her. He looked at the TV mounted in the corner of the shop. The news was playing. A banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Airline sues socialite Bellamy Galloway for $250,000. Flight ban issued globally. On the screen, a video was playing. It was Captain Elijah King, standing at a podium at a press conference, looking dignified and serious. Meridian Air stands by its crew and its passengers. Captain King was saying on the TV, "Racism has no place at 30,000 feet. We have banned Mrs. Galloway for life, and we are working with other major carriers to ensure she is placed on the universal no-fly list." Mr. Rivera looked back at Bellamy. His eyes were hard. "I know you," he said. "You're the lady on the TV." "Please," Bellamy begged. "I just need to get to Manhattan." "Get out," Mr. Rivera said, pointing to the door. "But Get out." He reached under the counter. "I don't serve your kind here." Bellamy froze. The irony hit her like a physical blow. "I don't serve your kind." The exact sentiment she had radiated her entire life. She turned and walked back out into the cold, drizzling rain. The paparazzi had caught up. She had no money, no ride, no friends, and nowhere to hide. She began to walk toward the subway station, a place she hadn't entered since 1998. She dug into the bottom of her purse and found a crumpled $5 bill she kept for tipping bathroom attendants. As she swiped the Metro card she bought, her hands shaking, she heard a voice behind her. "Going down?" She turned. It was a man in a hoodie. He looked just like Tobias Grant. Bellamy flinched, terrified, but it wasn't him, just a regular commuter. He looked at her, recognized her, and shook his head with disgust before pushing through the turnstile. Bellamy Galloway, the woman who owned the sky, pushed through the metal bar and descended into the dark, smelling underground, swallowed by the city she used to think she ruled. The air inside the Manhattan Supreme Court was heavy, stale, and smelled faintly of floor wax and old anxieties. It was a suffocating atmosphere, one that seemed to press down physically on the shoulders of everyone in the room. But no one felt the weight more crushing than Bellamy Galloway. 6 months had passed since the incident at JFK, but looking at Bellamy, it could have been 10 years. The woman sitting at the defendant's table bore little resemblance to the imperious socialite who had terrorized Terminal 4. Her signature platinum blonde hair, once maintained by a team of stylists every fortnight, was now pulled back into a severe, fraying bun, revealing inch-wide roots of dull grey. Her skin, stripped of expensive serums and facials, looked papery and tired. She wore a shapeless grey blouse and black slacks purchased from a discount rack, clothing she would have previously considered fit only for cleaning staff. The courtroom was packed. The fall of the Galloway dynasty had become a national spectator sport, a morality play broadcast on the evening news. Reporters lined the back rows, pens poised, hungry for the final act. Bellamy's court-appointed lawyer, Mr. Henderson, sat beside her. He was a man who radiated exhaustion, shuffling his papers with the enthusiasm of someone waiting for a bus in the rain. He didn't look at her. He checked his watch repeatedly, clearly calculating how soon he could leave. Across the aisle, the contrast was stark. The legal team for Meridian Air looked like a phalanx of sharks in bespoke Italian suits. They sat with straight backs and confident smiles. Behind them, sitting in the gallery with quiet dignity, were Captain Elijah King and Dr. Tobias Grant. They weren't gloating. They were simply bearing witness. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed, his voice bouncing off the high mahogany walls. Bellamy scrambled to her feet, her knees trembling. Judge Mary O'Connor swept into the room, her black robes billowing like a storm cloud. She took the bench, adjusted her spectacles, and looked out over the courtroom. Her gaze lingered on Bellamy for a long, uncomfortable moment. It was a look devoid of sympathy. "Be seated," Judge O'Connor said. The room settled into a tense silence. The only sound was the scratching of a reporter's pen and the frantic thumping of Bellamy's heart against her ribs. "In the matter of Meridian Airlines versus Bellamy Galloway," the judge began, her voice steady and echoing with authority, "and regarding the countersuit concerning the Galloway Estate Trust, the court has reached a decision." Bellamy gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. "Please," she prayed silently to a god she hadn't thought about in years. "Please let me keep the house. Just the house." "The court finds unequivocally in favor of the plaintiff, Meridian Airlines," Judge O'Connor declared. A collective murmur rippled through the gallery. Bellamy closed her eyes, a tear leaking out. "The evidence presented, including video testimony, flight logs, and witness statements, paints a clear picture," the judge continued, reading from the dossier. Mrs. Galloway's conduct was not merely a disturbance. It was a calculated breach of the contract of carriage, a direct interference with flight crew duties, and a gross violation of federal safety regulations. Her actions grounded an aircraft, displaced 300 passengers, and caused significant reputational harm to the airline. Bellamy flinched as if struck. "The defendant is hereby ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $248,000, O'Connor stated. "This covers the fuel costs, the crew overtime, the refunding of all passenger tickets, and punitive damages for the harassment of Meridian Air employees." Mr. Henderson let out a soft sigh, closing his file. He knew there was no coming back from that number. "Furthermore," the judge said, shifting her papers to the second stack, "we address the matter of the Galloway Family Trust." This was the killing blow. Bellamy held her breath. "The Board of Directors for Galloway Enterprises petitioned this court to uphold the morals and reputational damage clause found in the late Mr. Galloway's will. They argue that Mrs. Galloway's public display of racism and entitlement has irreparably tarnished the brand." The judge looked over her glasses at Bellamy. "Mrs. Galloway, you built your life on the legacy of a name. But a legacy requires maintenance. Your behavior was toxic to that legacy. The court upholds the board's decision." Bellamy let out a strangled, involuntary sob. "Your access to the family fortune is hereby permanently revoked," the judge ruled, her voice final. "The assets previously allocated for your stipend, totaling some $12 million, will be liquidated. As per the emergency bylaws of the trust, these funds will be donated immediately to the United Negro College Fund to support the education of young engineers and pilots from underrepresented communities." The irony hung in the air, sharp enough to draw blood. The fortune Bellamy had used to insulate herself from the world would now go to support the very people she had refused to sit next to. "Justice is not just about punishment, Mrs. Galloway," Judge O'Connor said softly. "It is about balance. Court is adjourned." The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Bellamy sat frozen as the room erupted into movement. She was destitute. The restitution would take whatever liquid cash she had managed to hide. She was losing her apartment. She was losing her car. She was losing her identity. Slowly, painfully, she stood up. Mr. Henderson was already halfway to the door. As she turned to leave, she found her path blocked. Captain Elijah King and Dr. Tobias Grant were standing at the end of the aisle. Bellamy looked up at them. Her eyes were red, hollowed out by months of sleepless nights. She wanted to scream at them, to blame them for her ruin, but she didn't have the energy left. She just felt small. "Captain," she whispered, her voice cracking. Elijah King looked down at her. His expression wasn't angry. It was something far worse. It was pity. "Why?" she croaked, a flash of her old indignation surfacing through the tears. "Why did you have to take it this far? You could have just moved him. You didn't have to ruin my life." Captain King adjusted his cufflinks, his movement slow and deliberate. "I didn't ruin you, Mrs. Galloway. You did this to yourself the moment you decided your comfort was worth more than another human being's dignity." "I was afraid," she lied, clutching her cheap purse. "I just wanted to be safe." "No," Tobias spoke up. His voice was calm, rich, and terrifyingly intelligent. He stepped closer, forcing her to look him in the eye, the same eyes she had refused to meet on the plane. "You weren't afraid. You were arrogant. You thought the world belonged to you because of a piece of plastic in your wallet. You thought you could treat people like furniture." Tobias gestured to the open courtroom doors, to the world outside. "I built the navigation system that guides those planes," Tobias said softly. "I hold a PhD in aerospace engineering. I have saved that airline millions in fuel efficiency. And yet, when you looked at me, all you saw was a hoodie and my skin color. You didn't see me, Mrs. Galloway. And now the world finally sees you." They didn't wait for a response. They simply turned and walked away, stepping out into the bright sunlight of a future that Bellamy would never be a part of. 3 years later, the harsh fluorescent lights of Sal's roadside diner buzzed incessantly, a sound that drilled into Bellamy's skull. Located on the grim outskirts of Newark, New Jersey, the diner smelled permanently of burnt bacon, stale cigarette smoke, and despair. "Table 4 needs more ketchup," the manager, a sweaty man named Stan, shouted from the pass-through window. "And pick up the pace, B. My grandmother moves faster than you, and she's dead." "Coming, Stan," Bellamy muttered. She wiped her hands on her stained, grease-spotted apron. Her feet throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache. She was wearing orthopedic shoes she had bought at a thrift store, and her ankles were swollen from an 8-hour shift. She lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat now, a place with thin walls and a radiator that rattled all night. She grabbed a bottle of ketchup and limp menus, forcing her face into a neutral mask. She kept her head down. She always kept her head down. She lived in constant terror that someone would recognize her, though the years and the hard labor had changed her face. The softness of wealth was gone, replaced by deep lines of exhaustion. She walked over to table 4, a booth near the window where the rain was lashing against the glass. "Here you go," she said, placing the bottle down without looking up. "Sorry for the wait. Can I get you started with some coffee?" "Thank you," the customer said. Black coffee would be great, and maybe some dry toast. Bellamy froze. She knew that voice. It was confident, articulate, and commanded attention without being loud. Slowly, terrified, Bellamy looked up. Sitting in the booth, reviewing a stack of laminated flight charts, was a young black woman. She couldn't have been more than 30. Her uniform was pristine, a crisp white shirt with black epaulets. On those epaulets sat 4 gold stripes. A captain. The young woman looked up from her charts. She didn't recognize the fallen socialite standing before her. To her, Bellamy was just a tired, older waitress with grey hair and sad eyes. "Actually, could I get a refill on the water too?" the young captain asked politely, flashing a warm, genuine smile. "Please, I've got a long flight to London tonight." Bellamy stared at the gold stripes. She stared at the woman's confident, kind face. A memory crashed into her mind, violent and vivid. The silence of the first-class cabin, the smell of expensive leather, the look in Elijah King's eyes when she had demanded his kind be removed. A lump formed in her throat, hard and painful as a stone. 3 years ago, she would have demanded this woman carry her bags. She would have sneered at the idea of her flying a plane. Now, Bellamy was the servant, and the woman she would have despised was the master of the sky. "Yes," Bellamy whispered, her voice trembling so much she had to hide her hands behind her back. "Of course, Captain. Right away." She hurried back to the coffee pot, her vision blurred by hot tears. She poured the coffee with a shaking hand, placing it gently on the table as if it were an offering. As she watched the young pilot take a sip and go back to her work, Bellamy Galloway finally understood. The world hadn't ended because she lost her money. The world had simply corrected itself. The balance Judge O'Connor spoke of had been restored. She turned to leave, but the pilot called her back. "Mom?" Bellamy froze. "She knows. She recognizes me." "You dropped this," the pilot said kindly. She held out a $5 bill. "And keep the change. You look like you've had a long day." Bellamy took the money. Her fingers brushed against the pilot's hand. It was $5, more than Bellamy used to tip for a $100 lunch. Now, it was her dinner. "Thank you," Bellamy choked out. "Fly safe, Captain." She put the bill in her pocket, wiped a tear from her cheek, and moved on to wipe the next dirty table. Her story is a brutal reminder that in the age of cameras and consequences, prejudice has no place to hide. She thought her wealth made her untouchable, but she forgot that gravity comes for everyone eventually. She lost her fortune, her status, and her pride, all because she couldn't show basic human respect to the people she deemed beneath her. It's a powerful lesson for all of us. Treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO, because you never know who you're really talking to, or who might be flying your plane. If you believe that karma always delivers, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to be kind, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of instant justice and dramatic twists. Let us know in the comments. Do you think Bellamy's punishment fit the crime? See you in the next video.